And welcome back. Another week and another Keene No Spin. I'm Randy Filio.
And I'm Chris Coates, and you know what? We are going to dive right in today because we have a packed show with guests.
Multiple
guests.
Multiple
we
guests.
haven't had a guest since we've come back and started doing the show again. We haven't had guests yet, so this is I apologize ahead of time to the two guests we have in studio with us today if we're a little out of shape when it comes to doing that guest thing.
We had so many requests. We told the 22 presidential candidates we're too busy for you.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So, but we want to dive right in. We know there's a lot going on in the city, and you're just going to have to wait until our second guest comes on because we can talk about city items because he just declared that he may be doing something in the near future. So
He declared something.
That's a hint if you can't figure out who it is.
Just a hint.
Yeah, so we have, to join us first right off the bat is Jim Romanier. He is the former editor and president of the Keene Sentinel, and he's here because, in reading all the work that after he left, he really found a passion. Maybe it was a passion prior to you leaving the Sentinel about water and the water we drink, and you've written a book about our changing ways around fresh water, and so we wanted to have him come on. He wanted to talk about a lot of the issues that are going on around water today, and what's going into the water, and the storms that are having right now. Currently, the 100-year rains that are now every year are really putting some damage into our drinking water, plus all the other chemicals that are going into the water too. So we wanted to have an opportunity to meet with you, talk to you about that. So first of all, hello.
Well, hello. Thank you very much for inviting me. I find the topic to be immensely interesting, and it led to publishing a book, which is going to come out from Bowen Publishing in Peterborough in early June. The title is Water Connections, What Fresh Water Means to Us and What We Mean to Water. And it's about the many ways that water flows through our lives. Look, we swim in it, we drink it, we use it to put out fires, we flood ourselves with it, we build dams to prevent water from washing over us, and we create energy from water. So the theme of this really is about the many ways that water flows through our lives, and the theme is change. Mm-hmm. Much of what we're talking about that I've written about is about changes in our behavior. For example, we don't do some things now that we used to do. We used to, within our memory, run raw sewage into rivers.
Right.
We used to be advised to flush our unused prescription medicines down the toilet. We don't do that today because that water can wind up in somebody else's drinking water system down the line. We used to allow our lakes and streams and ponds in northern New England be deadened by acid rain. We don't have acid rain anymore. So we are capable of changing our ways. The question is, are we capable of meeting the demands for change that are upon us now? For example, you mentioned hard storms that result from climate change. Can we do something about that? Or can we do something about the effects of climate change, harder rains, more flooding? What do we do about that?
One of the things that in reading some of the articles that you that are out there that you sent my way, I find it interesting that even with the food we eat, the water that we're putting on to grow the foods, if they're putting chemicals into the ground for the food to grow, could be affecting us, and the runoff of that into the rivers then gets back to us 2 times around. I mean, so it's the food, and it's also into our streams and our rivers, and into our oceans.
That is true. In the first floor of City Hall in Keene, near the elevators, there is a small diorama. Mm-hmm. And if you go and it's a small map that shows a farm, a village, a house, a stream. If you push a button, it shows how the water from say a golf course leaches into the groundwater supply. So that's an instructive instrument that I recommend everybody give a try to. But this is a fact. We are letting significant numbers of new chemicals leach into our water supplies, whether it's groundwater that you get out of a well or a reservoir, such as we have in Roxbury, and we don't really know the full health effects of all those chemicals. That's worrisome. It's worrisome to the people at the state government, worrisome to people in the federal government too.
How's that affecting Keene? I mean, we get our water source from Roxbury, right?
About 3/4 of Keene's water comes from two connected reservoirs in Roxbury. The rest come from wells. Keene's water system is, its water treatment system is pretty good. However, there is a history of problems. Going way back to, 1959 was the last waterborne typhoid epidemic in the United States. Where did that occur? In Keene. And the city has taken steps since that time to protect the water that flows to, throughout the city. But there are still a lot of unknowns, and that I don't envy the people who work in the water department for having to worry about those.
Is Flint, Michigan, just the tip of the iceberg? Is there? I mean, I was reading in there that is it Milwaukee, Wisconsin, also had some issues some years back in 1993. But are we kidding ourselves that this is not it's just a bigger issue?
Well, the issues in Flint, which had to do with removing lead from water pipes due to corrosive water, or Milwaukee, which was a pathogen that got into the water, those can happen anywhere. And as a matter of fact, the pathogens that got into Milwaukee, 1993, killed 70 people.
Right.
Sickened 400 people. That very pathogen has been found in the water supply in Keene. Fortunately, the water treatment system, the filtering system in Keene, was able to remove that. But it is of deep concern. When you look at all the ways that water can be polluted, it's frankly almost a miracle that we don't have more illnesses, more problems than we do.
So a lot of it's just been luck of the draw?
There is a bit of that. We can count on luck. There's luck happens both ways. Bad luck, good luck. I mentioned the typhoid epidemic in Keene. I'll explain what happened there. There was maybe 20,000 people living in the city at that time. 16 people wound up in a sequestered ward at the hospital. One of them died. They all lived in different parts of the city. They shop in different places. How did they all get sick? Well, it happened that there was a logger up near Woodard Pond, which is the principal reservoir in Roxbury, and he was a typhoid carrier. He had taken every precaution to guard he did not know he was carrying typhoid, but he took every precaution to guard that his waste and the waste of his horses did not wash into the water. However, bad luck, significant rain came and washed the illness into the stream that led down to Keene. Keene at that time had a water filtration system called sand filtering that been working since the beginning of the century in different parts of the country. But there's only one moment when that particular system doesn't work, and that's shortly after it's been cleaned. The water filtration sand filter system in Keene had been cleaned a day or two before the storm. So here was bad luck that allowed this pathogen to get all the way down into the water system, into the homes in Keene, sufficiently diluted that only 16 people got sick. So I guess you'd be lucky that you were not one of the 16.
Yeah.
Unlucky if you were one.
When we think about climate change, we think it's a coastal issue. That's just because we hear about how New York could be flooded out, and we don't think about that. It's actually an inland issue as much as it is on the coast. It
is very much so. The storms are harder. The studies show that hard rainstorms have increased in intensity 70% in New England over the last 30 years. That is a greater increase than any other part of the country, and it's bound to get worse just due to the way the climate works. Well, when you have hard rainstorms, you have hard floods. And that has material financial consequences. For example, the city of Keene is just now completing the upgrade of one reservoir dam in Roxbury. That's the Babbage Reservoir. It's about to move to upgrading the second one, which is the Woodard Pond Reservoir. Those projects are being undertaken with many hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer dollars. And why is it? To protect those dams from being washed away by these harder storms. So that is a consequence of climate change.
How did the government take action around phosphate pollution?
Around phosphate pollution?
Yeah.
Phosphate pollution, for those who were washing dishes and clothes in the early part of or in the mid part of the 20th century, benefited from the introduction of Tide, the wash day miracle. And that was filled with phosphates. And the problem with phosphates are that when they get into water systems, they feed algae. Algae is like a plant that doesn't look like a plant. It doesn't have roots. It doesn't have flowers. It just covers the water, fills the water, consumes the oxygen. Fish die, makes the water smell, makes it costly to clean it up before people can drink it. So the government, starting with states, pressed to have phosphates removed from the marketplace. It was a long and hard fight, but a credit to citizen action that no longer are the detergent makers producing those kinds of cleansers anymore. And therefore, algae problems persist, but not nearly of the order of what you're talking about there.
And is it just Keene, or is it across the country that you're seeing that rates for water continue to climb?
You will see them increasing across the country. As a significant indication of that, of the impact of that, the city of Philadelphia recently began offering credits to poorer households that could not afford their water rates. Why are water rates rising? Well, it's because many of the pipes that we have to distribute our water are ending their lifetimes. And so it costs money to dig up the old ones and put in the new ones. You know, it's going to keep happening.
And as we dig those up, it means that we're putting in a system that, for the long term, will have a higher level of protection, unlike Flint, unlike Worcester.
That's right. They will presumably, last another 50, 60 years. They won't last forever.
Right.
But we have to accept the fact that water rates have never covered the costs of water. I wanted to raise one thing about one of the findings in the book is that history can come out of unexpected places. I mean, it doesn't just happen with water.
Right.
I'll give you an example. There was a legislation passed and signed in 1992 by the first President Bush. It was called the Energy Policy Act of 1992. And it was in response to concerns about our importing too much energy, too much oil. And so the idea here, implicit and central to the law, was the stimulating alternative energy and the like. But there was one component of that which was very relevant to the taxpayers of Keene. In the late 1980s, the City Hall in Keene was worried that the city was going to run out of water. The demand was increasing the supply at a rapid pace, just due to the factories we had, the behaviors we had around water, wash your car, irrigate your garden. And so it priced out a supplement to the existing supply that comes from, most of which comes from Roxbury. And that was to build a collecting dam on Otter Brook, which is in the east part of the city, and then pump that water up to the water treatment system and combine it with the Roxbury supply. That particular project would have cost countless millions of dollars. It turns out it was not required. The growth of use of water in Keene flattened out and began to decline. And the reason was partly because factories were reducing their operations in Keene or moving out. But another one was the introduction of what were called low-flow toilets or low-flow shower heads and the like. And that was a mandate of the Energy Policy Act of 1992. Why would an Energy Policy Act deal with how much water is used in a flush of a toilet? Well, it costs money, it costs energy to clean up water before it's sent to the public. So that was the legislative rationale for that. But you probably don't think when you're using the toilet that when you flush it, you're flushing only 1.8 gallons now versus 3.5 gallons before. But that's a pretty significant when you've got 30,000 toilets being flushed multiple times a day. The amount of water that was used by the residents of Keene and the factories in Keene slowed down, began to decline. Those many millions of dollars for the supplementary supply were never had to be spent.
Now, in the book that you've written, it's there's a lot of Keene in it.
Yes.
I think people should know that. And again, it's called Water Connections, a new book about what fresh water means to us and what we mean to water. One of the areas that you talk about is the first water source that Keene actually had was in the 1800s, and it was Goose Pond.
That's correct.
And it was because it really came about because of a major fire in the downtown area.
That's right. Some people have been calling for a reservoir. At that time, the only water that was available came out of wells, or it came from pipes that had been put into streams to kind of bring it to the center of the city. In 1865, there was a significant fire, and in the downtown, many of the buildings were made of wood at that time, and the firefighters were doing well until their water supply ran out. They ran out of water, the wells went dry. And that led to demands that the city create its own water supply, and that was Goose Pond, about 3 miles north of the city. In subsequent years, other sources were spotted and developed, one of them in 1886 being the Woodard Pond, which was in Roxbury. The virtue of that and the virtue of the Goose Pond is they were at high elevations, so they flowed into the center of Keene by gravity. You didn't have to pump them anyplace. And eventually, Keene acquired other land in Roxbury. It currently owns about, close to a third of all the land in Roxbury, surrounding its 2 reservoirs there. So it's a relationship. I'm a selectman in Roxbury, so aside from writing about the relationship, I live it. And you can imagine we have things to talk about.
When you think about the water sources we have currently, how well protected are they from any acts of terrorism? And has Keene taken, do you know if Keene, and maybe Randy knows, and maybe our next guest would, but has Keene taken any measures to protect themselves from an act of terrorism?
First off, during World War I, City Hall spent money to have guards watching over Woodard Pond. In World War II, they spent money to have guards watch over Babbage Reservoir and over Woodard Pond. Shortly after 2001, after 9/11, the operators of the 8,000 water systems in the country, 8,000 largest water systems in the country, were ordered by the federal government to conduct a confidential survey of their exposure to risk and what they were going to do about it. Keene did that without any public discussion, the purpose of which was to not draw attention to what it was doing. So precisely what the precautions are, I can't tell you, but I can say that under the new revised structure that's around Babbage Reservoir, there's some fencing up there that did not exist before. So it is a matter of real concern, not just here. It is, when you look at the nation's reaction to the 9/11 attacks, you look at what happened in New York City, the obvious steps were taken in the minutes after the attack. The bridges were closed, the tunnels were closed, the UN was evacuated. But fully just 90 minutes after the second plane hit, the Commissioner of Health in the city of New York ordered that all the watershed lands around its reservoirs, the city's reservoirs, some of them 100 miles away, that they would be barred from anybody coming on. So clearly, there already was an awareness that public water is at risk. There is the fact that when you worry about water terrorism of that sort, that you have to take into consideration the concept of dilution. For the city of Keene's water systems to be polluted in a dangerous way by a terrorist would require truckloads of chemicals. So one is not to entirely relax here, but one should take into account that it really would take quite an effort to pollute those waters.
And there are so many. It seems like we've taken a lot of steps forward in many ways to address many issues, acid rain and other issues that are out there. But there are so many different chemicals that are going in the water that we have no understanding of yet.
That is true. There was I'm afraid I can't recall precisely the agency of government, but it's in the book, that somewhere in the 1960s they predicted that the total number of chemicals that would ever be created, the maximum number there would be 7 million chemicals. Most recently, the 50 millionth chemical was patented. And so this is to confirm your concerns there. There are so many chemicals out there that we have water treatment systems that are not equipped to deal with all of them.
Yeah.
So it is a matter of concern, and it gets to your earlier point about how lucky we may be not to have to suffer the consequences.
And you know, I've always been told that when it comes to what we're putting into the water from our sewage plants, it starts down in Long Island, on Long Island Sound, and works its way back up, and they test the waters all the way back up. And if they're finding certain chemicals that are concerned, then they start telling us that we need to, and it's a cost to the taxpayer because we have to do what we need to do, but that the EPA is at least trying to monitor the water that's leaving certain plants now more so than ever before. Well, I don't know under this administration. That may be a whole different matter, but.
Well, you know, most of the action takes place at the local level. For example, there is a Ashweelet River Local Advisory Committee. It's peopled by citizens, by volunteers, and they regularly test the water quality of the Ashweelet River. And there were findings made about 15 years ago that there were surprisingly large numbers of phosphates getting into the water, and down in the testing was done in Winchester,
right.
But the water was coming from Keene, and it was due to their findings that the state government mandated that the city of Keene spend more money to upgrade its water treatment system. So that was not a function of the federal government at work so much as local people local people getting involved. And that's one of the messages of the book. That is that there are lots of people, citizen scientists, who are increasingly taking an interest in watching out for our waters. So that's a hopeful note.
Right. Well, and one of I was talking to an individual who actually oversees the water and sewer plants up at the nursing home in Westmoreland, and he said one of the concerns that he's heard is that with all the storms that we're having, it's the erosion effect is problematic for the water because the water's ponds are lower because erosion's occurring.
And sediment is forming.
Forming, right.
That is correct. You know, one of the animating quotes of this book comes from a guy named George Perkins Marsh. He was an early environmentalist, 19th century. He came from Woodstock, Vermont. And he lamented the collateral and unsought consequences of human action. And what that was about was his observations in Europe and also in the United States that loggers were clear-cutting hillsides, forests, not planting anything in place of them. That led to erosion, that led to silting of rivers, that led to flooding downstream. So this is not to say that all unanticipated consequences of human action are bad, but that is one example, and you're referencing it right there. That is concerns about what we may be doing or may be occurring that is causing our water systems, our streams and rivers and ponds to be filled with silt and sediment. That's something that we need to avoid.
And another one would be that what boats are bringing into our ponds and our lakes too.
That's right, and there you have citizens too, citizen action too. People standing guard at boat ramps, telling a boater who's trailing in his boat from Vermont to say, "Let me check the bottom of your boat."
Right.
And there are some parts. There's a couple of lake associations of Vermont that actually have set up huge water-powered cleansing systems to wash over any boat that's coming in with 140-degree water. So
Right.
it's significant stuff. Because once this stuff gets in the water, it's very hard to get it out.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to come into us. And I don't know, have you been on Dan's yet? Dan Mitchell's show yet?
That will be coming up after the book comes out. Book comes out in June, and take a look at it. It'll be at the Toadstool, it'll be at the public library. It'll be around, and there'll be a lot of talks. And so I hope it encourages people to get more concerned with and active with watching out for water. So thanks a lot.
We've been talking to Jim Romanier. He's got a book coming out called Water Connections, a new book about fresh water means to us and what we mean to water. So I thank you very much for taking the time today. It's been an interesting conversation. I think it's one of those things that probably we could have gone on for the full hour because things kept popping into my head, and Randy always worries when that stuff happens.
I stayed quiet. I let Chris run the show on this one today.
Yeah. So we're gonna just be you and I for a second while we
Have
while
our
we get
surprise, surprise guest coming in.
next guest coming on. If you can't figure out who it is, then but there's been a lot happening in the last week.
Well, it's kind of funny, Chris. It was a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about potential mayoral candidates.
Oh yeah, we were predicting.
We were predicting.
Right now we're 1 for 1.
Oh, we were just pulling things out of the air and deciding. Do you know anybody that might be running? And I think politics in Keene, just like they are nationwide, are about to take off.
Yeah. Now I still say there might be a wild card in there, but at least one out of the two candidates that
we think that might sort of run
has jumped in. So
well, usually when an acting mayor in Keene, historically, somebody that's been there for more than a couple of terms steps down. Usually, a few people wind up jumping in. But
so you want to announce our next guest?
Do we know who he is?
I think people do, but
okay. And welcome to the show, Ward 2 City Councilor, longtime Ward 2 City Councilor, Mitch Greenwald, mayoral candidate Mitch Greenwald.
An unofficial mayoral candidate because you have to sign the document and give the $2.
In August, right?
In July.
August
June.
21st.
Is it?
August.
August 21st.
You're gonna
You
pay
know
your-
this, like you've done this research. Like you
I've
actually,
done the research, and I will be there just to continue a tradition. I'll be there at 6 in the morning,
Oh,
lift
yeah.
up a coffee.
Now, if I remember right,
Fred Parcells and I used to have this thing, and I swear to God, Fred would get up at like 4 in the morning and get there and just, because I could never be first on the list when it came to city council, because he was always there. You tried it a few times too.
I got there earliest once, but
Yeah.
that
And then
policy has changed.
It's
Thank
like
God.
after a while, it's like, this is just crazy. I could have stayed in bed for a few more hours.
Yeah.
And
Fred's always going to win.
And as Randy put it, the procedure has changed because now it's the Secretary of State does some random drawing of the alphabet and some crazy formula that only he and the city clerk can understand.
Right.
But hey, I'm a traditionalist with this.
So are you excited about this?
I am truly fired up about this, and I've been waiting and waiting. Well, I was ready to go 2 years ago, and out of respect for the mayor, I gave him every last moment. If you're going to run, you're going to run. I'm not going to run against you, and I want to encourage you to run.
Right.
Because I do absolutely believe Kendall Lane has been a terrific mayor through all the time, and probably if he wanted to run, I'd be putting up his sign again, as
Right.
I have in the past. But when he announced, I think Friday or Saturday, that he was not seeking another term, that just suddenly flipped the switch, and away I go.
Isn't it interesting, and this is something that if you have the honor to become the next mayor, it's really interesting to me to see a city councilor take that next step. That, I mean, Kendall's family has a legacy here. He really relished the fact of being mayor. He honored it, and I thought he did an outstanding job. And I think he'll, on some levels, be missed. His way of just working through things in a thoughtful, pragmatic way, I thought was great. But I think of somebody like Mike Blastos, who I thought was a great mayor, and he was a okay city council, but he was a great mayor. He became the grandfather of Keene. He was just, and Pat Russell with her
Yeah.
her strong beliefs and her push for doing right for the city of Keene. Going back to Bill Lynch, I mean, we've had a very
You're
good.
killing my whole comment.
Oh, sorry. I'll be quiet.
Chris is going to be quiet. This is a first.
I recently joined the Y, and I've been walking the track, and I was walking and walking this morning, and it just struck me that, hey, I want to be a mayor. This is really something. It's a progression for me, but that wants to put me in the same job, as you were just saying, Bill Lynch, Pat Russell, Dale Pregent, Jim Mazziello, Dick Peliquin,
Yeah.
Kendall, and Mike Blastos. It's daunting. I respect these people so much that it really is big shoes to fill.
You what? 20 years on the council?
Randy did
Give or
the
take?
math.
Yeah.
No, it's more than that.
Is it?
1994, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the greatest lies of the world that my good friend Randy told my wife, that three greatest lies in
Back
the
in
world.
1992.
Yeah. The check's in the mail, one size fits all. And,
Yeah.
and what Randy said to my wife, Ricky, oh, it's only 2 meetings,
One meeting a week. One meeting a week.
one meeting a week, about an hour or something.
Yeah.
And
Don't worry about it.
and you guys both know if you really get into it and you put your heart into it and you're on committees, there's meetings during the day, there's preparation work, there's an awful lot of time.
Well, the mayor's position has evolved.
Yes.
And it really has become something of you're a historian, you're a cheerleader, you're a leader. I mean, the list
more
just
than
keeps
just
just
appointing
right
committees.
and you're involved. You're going to luncheons. You're meeting with legislators and senators and and I think actually I was thinking about this today. I mean, you have a friendship with our Senator
Yes.
Jay Kahn, who I think is doing an outstanding job, and I think that benefits us. Because I think you having that relationship on that level, that when you see something that like meals and rooms tax that's supposed to be 60-40, we give 60 back to the state and we keep 40% of what we're collecting.
I think we're getting
And
19 now.
21% right now.
And we can't get the actual accounting
Right.
to actually know if we're a donor or a receiver on this.
Right, and so having a senator, you can work with him to get that
Yep.
some type of legislation to start pushing the issue at least. Let's start addressing some of these issues.
Yeah, and this is not on a partisan basis. It's that Jay and I are just really good friends for a really long time, and
Yeah.
he's a very good resource for me for a lot of information.
And I think on your end, Mitch, one of the reasons I jumped on board early when I heard you announce at 6 in the morning, and I just happened to be awake when I heard you announce.
Did you call in?
I did.
He did.
I
Did
did.
I was in Maryland, or I would have called in.
I've always said to you, I've never met a bad microphone.
This is true.
But one of the reasons other than being friends for a long time with Mitch, is that he's not running because there's a step beyond being mayor. It's not just a political step for you. This is
it.
You're actually This is the last hurrah. This isn't just a stepping stone to the next position. Which in politics, too many people are always looking at the next level rather than the level that they're running for. So I guess you can honestly say right here on the show that this is the kind of the last hurrah politically.
This is it, and I'll write it down. I'm not going to be. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I won't likely be 8 years in office or something. A couple of years, I just want to enjoy the experience. There's some things that I want to accomplish, some skills that I bring to the office that it's not a career. My family comes first, and I've got 3 great kids, 6 grandchildren, and they're all traveling all over the place this week. And I have a life. I'm still running a business, and as you were saying about the amount of time that goes into it, one of the again, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, one of the things that I am going to do a bit differently is delegate. There are 15 city councilors who want to go to events and want to cut the ribbons and participate in things. Let's empower them and bring them into the game more. I think that's something that would make the job of mayor also a bit easier, because there's a lot going on around Keene. So
Well, mayor's obviously it's turned into a full-time position with this just stipend pay. So nobody, at least you better not, nobody should ever run for mayor because of the lack of pay. This is a full-time job.
yes,
And and yourself owning your own business, obviously, and you'll have the time to do it. But,
I can make
if somebody's
my own
working a
schedule.
40-hour week to run for mayor, that's just not in the cards anymore.
Right, and I have full support of my son, who's my partner in the office, my wife, who's my partner in life, and my daughter, who's a history teacher, and all the grandchildren. Where I go, they go. So it really would be a
Yeah, well, you have to
family
have,
event.
obviously you have to have family support. And,
Yeah.
and here we are 22 years later, and I do want to say this around the other Ricky, I lied. It's more than one meeting a week, but I think you know
I think
that
it's
by
funny.
now.
When I decided to run for the school board again for a year, and I said, Carrie, it's I'll be gone one night a week.
always
She
say
looked
that.
at me and said, "You were on the school board for 9 years. I know what it takes."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
forgot."
But it's a desire to serve, and
Right.
and that
Yeah.
really is what
I
it
think
is.
that's the key, and I think whoever runs if they are truly doing it because they and I always that's what I always liked about Kendall. It was about the city of Keene. I mean, he ran that last term because he was concerned that there was a young, Elizabeth Dragon, the city manager, was just coming on.
Right.
Keene State College was in flux. There was real a void when it came to leadership. So he felt like he was a consistent, the constant in all of this. So, I think your longevity actually helps. It doesn't, and I mean, talk about your life story a little bit, because I don't think people really know. I mean,
A few of us do.
yeah, but it's pretty cool. I mean, you went to Keene State College. You've created businesses multiple times to be where you are today. And I think people think of you real estate.
You're right. I had a life before real estate.
Yeah.
Ricky and I went to high school in New Rochelle, New York.
Mm-hmm.
We were engaged as seniors. We got married in our freshman year at Keene State. Boy, think about that. 1970.
Yeah.
That's a lot of years. And then I couldn't find a
A
job.
lot of wonderful years.
Yeah.
If Ricky's
Oh, wonderful.
watching.
Yes. My very first job in Keene, Jim's still here. I worked at the Keene Sentinel.
Yeah.
I was a fill-in photographer when the regular guy, Wally Baker, was out with an injury for the summer. And I got to meet Jim, Tom Carney,
Oh, Tom, I forgot.
some of the other names escape me, but it was a fantastic experience of working into the community and seeing what's going on. And I was just a kid, 18 years old or something, and I was treated with great respect. This is back when film photography was the thing.
Yeah.
And I go into the dark room at 6 o'clock in
Yeah.
the morning
Yeah.
and hope that the pictures came out.
Yeah.
And it was a great summer. Then back to school, and I couldn't find a job, so we opened a little clothing store on the second floor of the Colonial Theater.
Yeah. Was that
Top
Top Shop?
Top Shop.
Okay.
And that kind of was the spawning of the name Top's Shop.
That's where Mitch and I first met.
Yeah.
Yep, I actually spent money at his shop.
Did you?
Yep.
Well, back then, if I remember, the Top Shop was, it was a business, but it was, if you didn't have a lot of money, you could go in there and you could find the clothes you needed.
Well, the advertising line was everything under $5.
Yeah.
And I had connections into New York. My family basically was New York Garment District. And if my life had taken a different tact, I probably would have been struggling in the Garment District in New York. Unfortunately, I didn't. I went the retail end. So, selling all kinds of stuff. But realizing that we were selling to the community. We were college students, but we were selling to the community. When the college goes home, business continues. So we did get to meet community people coming in, and right down the hall was the Chamber of Commerce. So when you talk about young business people, I was a pretty darn young business person at the time, 19. I think by the time I was 20, I was chairing the Downtown Merchants Group. And you know what we were talking about?
Parking?
Good, you got it on the first guess. always
Yeah.
parking. And the business grew. I survived the first rebuilding of downtown in the 70s. Then we moved across the street to where Creative Encounters is, and that was a pretty good-sized store. And then came the next rebuilding of downtown in the 80s. I was fortunate enough to be able to purchase the Sentinel block, the corner of Main Street and Gilbo, and that was the big store. it was really good. Menswear, women's wear, bridal gowns, the whole deal. We had a store, Riverside Plaza, which had Bradley's as the anchor at the time.
Yeah.
And that was our jean store.
Okay.
Haberdash. So I'm taking you through.
Haberdash. Oh yeah.
Yeah, a little blast
Wow.
in the past.
Yeah.
Levi's for guys, girls, and kids.
Yeah.
And that was great fun while it lasted.
Yeah. That's when you could get a pair of Levi's for like $11 to $14.
Yep.
Yeah. Not you see those today. People are actually wearing ripped jeans, and they're paying like $100 to $200 for ripped jeans. I mean, I earned my ripped jeans. I wore them out.
Yeah. I remember thinking how crazy it was with the faded pants, because that was before the rip came in.
Yeah.
But, meantime, we had 3 kids, and they all went through Keene schools. My son and daughter went to college in Oneonta, New York, and then moved to New York City to see what it was all about. And to my son's credit, he was very, very successful in New York in advertising. His final job there was at MTV, and he's making a whole lot of money. September 11th happened, and suddenly, is this the place to raise a family? And when you see your boss and your boss's boss, all of them going in at 9 in the morning and leaving at 9:30 at night, that's no way to have a family. So he was smart.
Plus, would he be a dancer? Would he be a singer today?
I don't know. He could be on Broadway.
Yeah, I know.
But he and I had a conversation about what's it like working father and son, and I spent a good deal of time interviewing like the Carbonis, Tim and Mike, Anthony DiTullio, Peter Bradshaw, and I'm trying to think who. And anyone that I could find that worked father and son, what made it work? And what it does is it takes cooperation and mutual respect. And in all the time that we've been together, again, I haven't done the math, but it's over 10 years, we've never had an argument. A couple of times we've walked with clenched teeth, like, what do you mean you left that leaf blower in their backyard? Or, whatever. And it's worked out very well. Jody is a teacher at Keene High School, which is pretty stunning that she's doing that. And she's in Italy right now with a class trip. And my wife is a retired math teacher from the middle school. Youngest daughter currently lives in Stamford, Connecticut, and she is a paralegal working at the NFL, which sounds really exciting, but I can't get tickets. But her husband is from Philadelphia, and she had to go for work to the Super Bowl.
Eagles,
Yeah.
Patriot. Well, we don't talk about
Yeah,
Yeah, I know. Well, that was probably his greatest moment. So
So,
anyway, that's kind of the course of how things evolved.
all right. So, what is it as you step in? Do you have goals and objectives that you really feel passionate and strong about as you move forward to that you're going to really address to the citizens of Keene?
Yeah, I do. A lot of it, it's continuation of some very good work that's been done in the past by past mayors and under Kendall's 8 years. Economic development is absolutely a prime objective because it really does color everything going on in terms of tax growth, job growth, wage growth. I chaired the Economic Development Committee. I call it Part 1. They came out with its report about a year ago. And now we're in Part 2, the implementation phase. Report will be coming out in July. Economic development takes in housing, jobs, wages, arts and culture, all facets to encourage the growth of the city and the prosperity for the people that are living and working here. Next meeting is in May. We're talking about housing. And as you know, there's quite a bit of housing going on. One of the questions that will be answered, because I believe he's coming, is the developer of the Roxbury Street project. What exactly is that project and who are they aiming at? We're trying to get the Colony Mill people to come in.
That's Brady and Sullivan.
Yeah,
And the other one is the individual from
Tony Marcotte.
Yeah, and that's like 142 units.
Yeah. So that's an awful lot of housing.
Where are they
coming.
parking everybody over there?
That was the planning board's wisdom.
Or lack of.
Yeah, well, it's zoned central business. Central business does not require parking. But I also view it, because that is my business, you got to provide the amenities for the tenants.
Yeah.
And parking is a prime amenity.
If I'm going to rent a place, I want to know I have a space.
If I'm going to build,
At least.
if I'm going to build a project, I want it filled with tenants. And if these are 2-bedroom apartments and there's a half a parking space per apartment, I'm not very good at math, but that doesn't compute.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. But on the good part, that will raise all the boats. The competition is really tightening in the rental business. So some of the less desirable housing, if it's not brought up to better conditions, will be more difficult to rent. And I think the owners will start improving their properties to keep it competitive. Rents will definitely stop increasing. If anything, I would imagine decreasing would be more the word, to stay competitive, because you got to fill your units.
Mm-hmm.
And one issue that you're going to take over, if you get handed the keys to the city as mayor, is going to be the Kingsbury property. You'll be deep in the middle of that. Obviously, there's a lot of, I call the Kingsbury property a lawyer's dream because it keeps them all busy.
No.
But it will certainly be, the Marlborough Street, connector to the whole area, and the Kingsbury property will be right in your lap.
Marlborough
mayor.
Street is happening this summer. It's actually happening now. The gas company's putting pipes in. The Kingsbury property, I'm already in it. And Dave Richards, Jan Manwaring, and I signed a letter asking that the city start the tax lien tax taking process. And that has been talked around. And it got the owner's attention, which really was my motivation with that. I don't really want to see the city take the property and have to deal with it. Let the private individual do what he said he was going to do. And so far it's moving along at a snail's pace, but I've been told that a couple of the old tanks are being removed. Contractors have been there looking at demolition of the buildings that need to come down. So if he could be moved to do the right thing, perfect. No lawyers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, because obviously once it gets litigated, it just drags out forever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because he's a pretty big individual who's worked in other areas. He has the ability, and hopefully the actions that I've taken so far got his attention, and
you don't
we'll move it
and you
forward.
did it because something needs to be done.
Needs
I
to be
mean,
done,
the
yeah.
back taxes are like over $900,000, aren't they, or
Yes.
close to?
He's been paying
The current.
reasonably the current bill, but when he bought the property at auction, it came with the tax bill.
Right.
That wasn't paid, so that's accumulated interest and penalties.
Right.
So that keeps growing. I'm told that there's a good payment coming, but show me the money.
Is there boring that's going on there?
That would be up to the owner to allow on the property, and
That's one of the issues.
yeah. And I have to be careful what is said.
Okay.
But it's moving forward. That's
Yeah.
what I'm excited about.
And when you talk about economic development, do you think that your background lends to having a better understanding of what people today that are in business are facing, whether it's workforce, whether it's being able to survive in the economic times that we're in, whatever it may be?
Absolutely. As a small, and I hesitate to call myself a developer because that could be misconstrued, but the project on Emerald Street that I built had an architect, I had contractors doing it, but it really was every day, me, ladders, dealing with what are we going to do with this problem? How are we going to solve it? How am I going to get in and out of City Hall in a timely enough manner? Because I only had limited funds for this project to drag on. So learning firsthand what the bureaucracy is about is really, really key. It's way different from someone who comes in from a bigger business background with consultants and with architects and attorneys and all the rest, and just the ability to to drag a project out. I had a timeline, and I remember sitting at the planning board. I had money for 3 months worth of before construction, because I was making option payments to hold the property while all the plans were drawn and the planning board approvals. And I sat down, Bob Mallet, I think, was the chairman, and I said, I have to tell you, because this is at the time of Conover. This is not Conover here. This is little guy.
Yeah.
And you have the ability through the planning board to make it happen or to kill it. And I will agree to most anything you want, tell me. But going through the process and living with code enforcement and how long will it take to get these plans reviewed. And that had a lot to do with the push that I brought to the Economic Development Committee to simplify the process on the fourth floor, as we call it. Get a timely response to questions. And there are solutions, and this is maybe one of my life mantras, solutions to all problems. So.
Yeah. Other issues?
Other issues. The downtown revitalization made an attempt. It kind of got stalled. It didn't happen. What's going on is that we have to rebuild the infrastructure, the plumbing, the underground water, sewer, storm drains that Jim was talking about previously, the water systems. It all happened a long time ago, the 1800s. And
It's
There's still wood water pipes down
pipe.
there.
It's the
Yeah.
coolest thing. If you ever go down to the Public Works, they have those, and it's pretty.
I only wish I had saved the section of pipe that came out of 47 Main Street, the storm drain, that went under the sidewalk. And it was totally clogged with roots. And fortunately, we were able to dig right in the planter bed and pull the roots out by hand, and, because it's old. And it was terrible, and we got the line running. But these lines are old. They need to be replaced for all the buildings, and it will definitely be an effort to get all the buildings to replace their connections when this project is going on. So if the roads are being dug up, the sidewalks are being broken up, we have an opportunity to review, is this really the way that we want it? And as I said before, I lived through 2 rebuildings so far, and I know it's a nightmare. Having dirt sidewalks, it may look good, pictures from the 1800s, but it's a pretty tough road. I've lived through it. So we have the opportunity to put the roads back differently. We have all these outside vendors that want out. Okay, good, let's accommodate them. It's not just for now, but let's hope for the next 20, 30 years we won't be having the conversation again. I hope there's still retail in 20 or 30 years.
Right.
Downtown, as you've seen, Mitch, when you were a retailer downtown, that it's changed over to a social downtown,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's how downtown is going.
But
Yeah.
it's still part of the American dream.
Absolutely.
That everyone can own their own business, and just how wonderful it was. Actually, your wife's family was another clothing store, College Girl.
Yes. Yep.
And we did battle.
Oh yeah, no,
and it was fun.
If you lived in Keene long enough, you've either owned, managed, or worked at a retail store downtown.
Yeah.
Now, your relationship, jumping to a couple other things, we only have a few minutes left. Your relationship with the Keene State has always been good as an alumni there, and your relationship with the new president is good. So I'm sure you're going to pursue continued relationships with the president of Keene State.
Well, I'm already pursuing it. We've had lots of conversations. I was, believe it or not, a biology major at Keene State, and that was an interesting experience.
Right.
But back at the time, it was important to stay in college and get good grades if you didn't want to see.
You wanted a job?
Yeah. So
Hey, and just one quick thing. First of all, good for you to do your homework around the kiosk thing. I know it was a headache to everybody, but
Oh, man.
but you stood up, you said what you went around, you talked to people, and sometimes it takes courage to stand up and say, I voted this way, but I've talked to people, and this for the time being is the best course of action. And I think for me, when I looked at this whole situation, I thought, just if you're not ready to commit all the way with everything and a vision, then put back what you had and let's move on until we're ready to do that. And I would say that if the arts corridor is real and the work downtown is going to be done, then those two things combined should be done at the same time.
yes, yeah. I really did spend 2 days in and out of stores, stopping people that I didn't know on the sidewalk. And you know, there's a lot of interesting folks stopping people on the sidewalk downtown. And you know, I asked them, "What about the kiosk?" Most people didn't know what I was talking about to start with. And then after a little more conversation, yeah, that's that confusing thing where you got to put in your license plate. So then another 10 minutes discussing what the pay and display means. Oh, that means I have to put my money in, walk to the car, walk back, you know, back and forth, and nobody was excited about it. You know, that was just a fact.
Yeah.
No one liked it. Some people vehemently didn't like it.
Yeah.
And finally it sunk in, what are we doing? What's the point of doing this? And I'm not really too thrilled with flipping on my committee, as I put it. I chaired the finance committee, and when we make a decision, we tend to really stick with it. It took a lot of soul searching, and I hate to put soul searching and parking meters in the same thought, but it took a lot to just all of a sudden, boom, and I hadn't told anybody that I was doing this. And you know, I'm doing the committee presentation as we do before a vote, and the Finance Committee reviewed the kiosk, and we came up with a recommendation to change to the pay and display. Pause. Now let me tell you what I think.
Just so you know,
Yes.
I hate to cut you off, and you're more than welcome to come back anytime, but we got about 25 seconds.
We do. Yeah, 25 seconds
So,
left. And
so if you want to say anything.
Okay.
20 seconds or less.
Okay, I am committed to Keene. You'll see that on my sign back there. That's
It just
that's
right
my
over your head
tagline.
when you're speaking.
Committed to Keene. I chose to live here. I raised the family here. I went to Keene State. I have one desire, and that is to serve the public. No other motives. This is it. And thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Perfect
See
timing.
you in 2 weeks.
See you in a couple of weeks. Thank you. Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Jim.